Hello friends, and welcome to my channel for another custom action figure vehicle video. I'm really excited about this one. We're gonna make a turtle van for my custom 1/12 scale soft goods seamless Ninja Turtles. Now, I previously made a turtle van out of one just like this about 3 years ago, and I sold it. It was before I started making vehicles and figures that go with them, like the centerpiece of my collection. And so I made it and I was like, I don't really have room for it. I just wanted to make it. It was basically to go with the 1990 movie Turtles from NECA, and the idea behind it was like, what if April had given them that white van from the movie, they got it working again, and they turned it into like a realistic version of the turtle van. So with this one, I'm gonna do that, but take it up to the next level. So because these aren't movie turtles, this is like my own custom, you know, what I would like the turtles to look like in a more grounded, realistic kind of tone. So that's how I'm gonna approach this van. It's gonna be a similar aesthetic to like the toys in the cartoon, but the idea is that like, what if that were real? Let's go ahead and switch up the view and take a closer look at it on the workbench. Friends, just wanted to pop in real quick and let you know this is gonna be a two-part video. You'll see why as we get into it, but this build is just like, there's a ton of stuff to do on this, and I wanna make it as cool as possible. So with that, just wanted to give you a quick heads up. We'll talk about it more at the end, but for now, let's get right into the build. The one I had before was from Maisto, and I don't know, this is Rides, G-Rides. This is so corny. The one I had, also the front wheels were the same size as the back, and I actually made like moon hubcaps out of them by cutting out the bottom of an aluminum can and just wedging it in there, and it'll actually look pretty good. Now this particular version is different from the one I had before in that the one I had before was just a shell. This one actually has a bit of an interior in it already. This is meant to be an MP3 player, so you can see there's a speaker up here. I'm gonna plan to make a soft goods ragtop for this, so that will probably be my access point for how I get into this, because, you know, ideally I'd cut the doors open, but this top piece in the front here at least is a separate piece from this bottom half. Like this whole front is an insert. And so I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that. So I've already got it disassembled. There are a lot more parts than this, but this is, you know, the shell and the chassis. This is gonna be really difficult. This piece is separate, right? So you can see it goes inside and it actually has like support pieces on it. That's what it looks like without, which means I either have to cut out all these windows, which is going to be painstakingly tedious, especially because it gets thick right here, or I would have to try to fabricate these pieces out of styrene, and I really don't want to do that. So I'm going to try cutting the windows out. You can also see this thing is disgusting. I don't know how old this is, but it's dirty as hell. So there's going to be a lot of cleaning first and foremost, and then, you know, it's pretty dinged up. I'm going to have to sand all of this off, because when you paint over something like this, you'll just see it in the paint, like raised up underneath. So I'm gonna change the profile. Like this thing is kind of like, you know, it's slammed to the ground. It's set about like that. So I'm gonna raise it up, and I'm gonna put different wheels and tires on it. I wanna do things that are like reminiscent of the turtle van, you know, the party wagon toy and what it looked like on the cartoon, but also like more realistic and plausible. Like I want this to look like they used items that they found and they were able to salvage, and not necessarily like they had the money and resources to just soup up this like high-tech van. So it's gonna have, you know, the piece that flaps down, the kind of like armor shielding piece on the front, because I love the way it looks when it has that piece on the front. So that'll hinge down over the windows. I want to do a thing with the spoiler. So the way that this thing is set up, it doesn't have a cover on the engine compartment. Like it just came like that. So I think a cool way around that would be like when it's in normal driving mode, it has a piece that covers it, but then it's on a hinge and it can move up and be the spoiler on the back of the van. So they can be less conspicuous and then more conspicuous, right? Because the idea is that they're ninjas. And so, you know, I want to kind of keep true to that notion. Also, something that's pretty iconic to the turtle van is the height on the back here. There's always like that kind of shell piece. Now, I don't want to cover this in like a turtle face on the front and their logo and foot stinks, and it's not going to be like that. But I do want to have like the silhouette of this thing be reminiscent of what we know and love. So I'm trying to figure out some kind of a roof rack that's going to have similar to a turtle shell pattern, just in like the framework of it, that can go on top. I think that would look pretty cool. All right, going handheld for a moment here to show you the wheel and tire setup that I'm using. So if you recall, you know, it's got these like big wheels, low profile tires on it. Most RC cars come with that if they're not like mud crawlers. And I wish you could get some in a normal profile more easily, because it's really annoying to try to make it like a realistic looking car with these big old wheels on them all the time. But I got these. These I think are actually 1/16 scale, but they go pretty perfectly with the size that I wanted, and they have a better profile. So, you know, I wanted something that looked a little more durable and tactical and not just like little VW road tires. And they come with this hub. So essentially you put the hub on, and then it also comes with these little screws. So then you screw that to the hub. So it'll sit on there like that. Now, to give it more of a VW look, I actually have this camper van that I saw online. I thought maybe that'll work for a turtle van. It ended up being too big, but I am gonna use it for parts, and I'm gonna have to do a little bit of cutting on this to make it fit. But essentially these are gonna go over the centerpiece like that, and I'm gonna paint them silver. So it's gonna retain that Volkswagen look, but it's going to be on, you know, these more substantial wheels. I'm also having to put some of this dense EVA foam inside the tires to keep them from getting flat spots, because as they are, they're completely hollow. This is one with the foam in it, and this is without. Thing is, once I put these on the vehicle, if they don't have something in there, over time they're gonna get flat and look really bad. So that's my way around that. So, you know, that's some of the tedious work you don't see in these things when they're done. But all right, little update here. So I got the new wheels and tires on, and this was, I mean, we're talking like 3 hours of work here. These projects are always so much more tedious than you think they're gonna be. A lot went into this. First of all, as I mentioned, I had to fill each of these tires with that EVA foam. And then I forgot initially that the holes in the center of these were not large enough to fit onto these rods that hold the wheels on. I had to drill into those. With the front, these sat so low that I actually had to take this little like assembly here from the top, and I had to move it to the bottom so that it would sit higher. So as you can see, all that stuff used to be up here. It still maintains its turn, so that's good. And then back here, I had to do a ton of work to this. In order to move it up here, I had to create these spacers so that where these used to screw in here, these little shocks used to screw in there, now they're, you know, maybe a couple centimeters higher. And in doing that, one of these broke, so I had to like find a way to fix that. So yeah, a ton of work, but as a result, it is sitting higher than it was. All right, excuse the mess, but I finally got this stance and interior like floor pan set up the way I want it. The way this is sitting on this frame is so much better. This took like an entire day to get to this point, pretty much like a whole day of working on this. It looks a lot more like a VW bus now. Next is gonna be to start building out the interior. The nice thing about these old buses is that the interior was pretty much just the same painted metal as the exterior with trim pieces affixed to it. So I don't have to go crazy building out like, you know, door panels and stuff like that. You can see in here, I added this kind of a cleat, like lip piece that rests on this flat piece, so that allows it to stay in place in the front. And you know, eventually I'll find more of a permanent way to affix it, but just having it be able to rest there so that the stance is consistent is nice. These wheel well covers were super hard to get to finally glue in place. Most of this is going to be covered with that plating material that I mentioned, but first I need to figure out where the seats are going to go and kind of build up some of that stuff. Getting there slowly but surely, just like a Volkswagen bus would. Checking in again because I got the windows cut out. I really didn't think that I was going to be able to do that with much ease, just because I've had to cut out stuff before from this kind of plastic, and it's difficult and it sucks. But this wasn't too bad all in all. I changed the stance a little bit. You can see it's a little bit higher in the back because I want this to be a little more of a realistic approach to this. I don't want it to be like so cartoony that it's like a version of this van that would draw a crazy amount of attention to it. I am kind of trying to operate in the realm of the idea that they're ninjas, and so discretion is like a thing for them. And they're also these like, you know, freaks among humans. So I want this van to be kind of a stealthy turtle van in the sense that like it could just look like a cool van, but it is also reminiscent of the Turtle van that we know and love. So I'm really pleased with the new stance of it, and just like the way it generally is really reading as a Volkswagen bus more than like a slammed lowrider version of one now. All right, so I got the dash pretty much done. From a build standpoint, I still need to paint it obviously, but I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. This is kind of an interesting, difficult shape to make, these old VW buses. This is the steering wheel from that camper van I mentioned, and I put this styrene rod in there. So I scratch built this whole dash. The old VW buses had this kind of column down the back of the dash that I assume this had like wiring in it for the radio and maybe the heater and stuff. So on these, there's a speedometer here with a fuel gauge right there, and then they also have a little clock and a radio and then an ashtray. I have that marked because I made the ashtray separately because it's tiny and it's going to be painted chrome. Yeah, pretty happy with how this turned out. This was a lot of work, a lot of like waiting for glue to dry, holding pieces tight, especially these corners up here. I use a piece of half round here just to kind of make that seam a little cleaner looking and to kind of give it the dimension that it has in the real thing. So the interior is coming along and I'm pretty happy with it. Working on the seats here, and I'm using the pink insulation foam that I used to make dioramas with. I've cut it into this size and shape of piece that I want, and then I have sanded down the edges to give it the shape of a car seat. It took me 90 minutes to sand all these. I know that because I watched a 90-minute documentary while I was doing it. So a lot of work involved. It might be a little hard to see, but I sanded them in a way that tried to show the wear and tear that seats this old would have. Like there's kind of a dip in these spots and on these where people would be sitting. And then these are going to be attached like that. I'm gonna use a stylus tool to make some lines to mimic the stitching, and then these will get painted up to look like actual seats. So there's gonna be one color on the side on the front and then a different color for the top. These are the front seats, and these are gonna go obviously in the front, but I have... All right, so here's one of the completed seats before being painted, and I just used some old black paper clips that I had and made the seat framework out of it. Once this is painted, like I can't wait to see how it looks. I tried to make it look kind of lived in, you know, without being like perfectly straight lines and everything. So hopefully that translates to the finished product. All right, so I got the seats installed here, and I'm doing some little seat belts on here using just sort of random pieces. These are this brown ribbon that I got that works really well as like vinyl straps in miniature. And then seatbelt pieces are made from just random bits of this old like 1/24 scale model Mustang that I've had for years, that I just kind of like take little bits and bobs from. I made some fake duct tape. I was inspired by the Super 7 version of the Party Wagon that has duct tape on one of the seats, so I made some using masking tape and just painting it with kind of a silver magnesium color. So I'm going to paint the undercarriage parts that are styrene black. Yeah, then the chassis will pretty much be finished. I need to do some more seat belts. But I don't know, I might just leave them up front, because you don't see the seat belts in the rear ones a lot of the time. Like if you ever had one of these, like we had one when I was a kid and they always fall and crack here. You have to fish them out. So maybe they'll just be back there. I don't know, we'll see, because these are pretty time consuming, but they look cool, so I may do a couple more. But all right, checking in with a pretty significant update here. So initially I was going to try to make a spoiler, right, the same way that the Playmates Party Wagon had other iterations of the Turtle van, but I was trying to do something kind of stealthy where it would fold down like this and then cover the engine compartment. This was really difficult to like size and cut, and I got it to where it's like exactly perfect to fit in between the taillights and everything. The plan was that I was gonna put some kind of hinges here and then some kind of bars that go out like this, and then it would just come up like that. And then I was like, oh, you know what? It actually might look better if it were like this, and it actually kind of contours with the van perfectly that way. So it would have looked something like this, a little less ostentatious, and I think it would have just kind of like fit a more realistic version of this a little better. But I ended up realizing I was going to make a roof rack for it, right? And then I was like, you can just buy roof racks. Like, why would I spend an entire day or two like painstakingly gluing pieces of plastic or wood together to make one when I could just buy one from Amazon that's made for a 110 vehicle? So I wanted to somehow emulate like the turtle shell pattern that's on the top of the Party Wagon's various iterations, but I didn't want to do one that was just like straight up like a turtle, because I just think that's kind of not in line with what I'm trying to make, you know, as a realistic version. So I thought, well, this is a nice compromise. Like, it's, you know, it's kind of a grid pattern, like offset a little bit. It's like, it's sort of reminiscent of that. So I was happy with that. Now, this thing is going to have the rag top, so I needed something that wasn't going to go over the whole thing. And the Turtle Van, typically, you know, traditionally the cartoon and the Party Wagon and stuff, they would have this bump right here, right? Like this raised piece. And so I wanted to give this van like that aesthetic without just having to build a whole new section to go on here. And so to me, a roof rack was the perfect solution for that. In finding one, it ended up being not the right size. I had to make an additional like rail piece to go with it. So I cut styrene, bent it to shape, and then I used these little L pieces. I've spaced it so that it just fits perfectly right on there. Now I'm gonna have to fix this somehow. I'm thinking I'll probably end up gluing it. And it, you know, it kind of gives it the same profile as like if it had a spoiler or if it had like that bump thing I was talking about, you know, in the design. The cool thing about this also is that it comes with spotlights in there, and that'll look pretty cool. And then now I'm working on the sort of blast shield windshield piece. That is essential to the Turtle Van to me. You know, one challenge I was running into is how I was going to fit the rear bumper on with that spoiler piece anyway. And, you know, because once this is on here like this, like barely fits in between these two bumper pieces. Like, it was going to be pretty tight. So working on the frame system for the rag top here. So I did want to make a functioning rag top in this. To do that, I took two of these little L-shaped styrene pieces and glued them together so that they make kind of a U shape. And then I glued them along, made these rails out of them here on both sides. And then I just took these styrene rods, basically fit them inside so that they roll along. And then I have a piece of like a canvas tote bag, maybe not canvas, it's like tote bags you get at the grocery store or whatever. And I have a green one that I found that we had. So I'm gonna cut that up, glue the pieces down together around these rods, and then hopefully I'll have a functioning rag top. I also got these masked off and I sanded this thing down so that it'll take the primer a little bit better. I had to patch this in here because there was a hole where I broke some of the interior stuff off and it just kind of took some of this with it. So I patched it with some epoxy sculpt. I'll have to sand that down a little bit. I did it on both sides there just to make sure there were no holes because there was a gap when I put the front windows in. Just wanted to give an update on the van now that it is primed and sanded. For the most part, it's pretty much ready for paint. I got to make window glass basically out of action figure packaging. Try to figure out a way to adhere it to the inside of the van without taking up all the paint with it, and then also finishing it off so that it looks clean. So we'll see what I come up with. You know, a lot of the stuff I always make it up as I go, but you know, it's always kind of cool to see when it's one color. So as I mentioned at the outset of the video, this is going to be a two-parter. Every time I turn around, there's like 10 more things I got to do on this thing. So what I want to do is close out with a list of all the stuff that has yet to be done, so you'll kind of get an idea of why a build like this takes as long as it does and why I had to divide it up. So as you can see, I still have to mask the van for the green paint, and then I got to paint it green. I got to do the underpaint on the chassis part, like the wheel wells that are still white styrene. I got to wire up the lighting for the front and the back. I've got to make the interior trim pieces. This is probably going to be the most time consuming. I also need to do like the door trim pieces. I have to cut the windows out, paint detailing. I got to do some weathering, you know, put some dirt on it, a little bit of rust here and there, make it look like it's been driven, maybe put a little bit of dirt paint on the wheels. I got to paint all the chrome trim, so the headlight bezels, you know, some of the stuff on the dash, the window trim pieces. I may even have to also paint some like black weather stripping, so we'll see how that goes. Got to paint the hubcaps and affix those to the wheels. And then I've got to do all the dashboard details. So I got to print out a little dial and do some paint work and stuff like that. And then I got to do the finishes on the roof rack, which I'll get into in the next video. So that's going to conclude part 1 of this turtle van build. And I really want to thank you all for watching. I know a lot of folks have been waiting patiently for this, and the support is super appreciated. Part of dividing this up into 2 parts was to get something out to you all who have been waiting on this. It's enough footage and enough material that I was like, it really should be 2 parts, especially if anybody wants to try to do this on their own. And, you know, part of doing this also in a 2-parter is like, if you all get excited about it, it gets me excited about it. It makes me want to like keep going, because I'm making this stuff by myself, like in a vacuum basically. And so, you know, there's no like external excitement for it. It all has to come from me and my own steam. And so putting out a part 1 is helpful, because if people are like, oh man, I can't wait to see this done or whatever, then it's like, yeah, I gotta finish this because people are waiting on it. If you're new to the channel and if you haven't seen, you know, these turtles or anything before and you're curious about them, there is a build video for Raphael and then overviews of the other 3 brothers. Now I do have kind of a pre-recorded end of the video, you know, here's where you can find my other stuff and my graphic novels and things like that. I did want to add to that real quick that the t-shirts that I have available on Redbubble, they often run sales. So they're usually like 40 to 60% off. So if you've been eyeing any of them, check the link. You know, they're usually pretty heavily discounted. So with that, thank you all so much for watching. Your support is always appreciated. You know the spiel, hit that like button. It helps other people find the channel. Also, if you have any, you know, friends or family or whatever that are super into turtles or this kind of project, shoot them a link to this. I would love for them to get to check it out too, and I'd appreciate it. And with that, I'm gonna let me from a couple months ago close this out. I invite you to click the like button and hit subscribe and join me as I make cool stuff. You know, custom figures, dioramas, vehicles to go with the figures. I review new stuff that I get on the channel. If you're looking for other ways to support this, I've got t-shirts available. My Head on Swivel shirt, as well as several other action figure and comic book themed shirts, are available in my Redbubble shop. If you've never used Redbubble, it's pretty great. You pick the color shirt, the style, and the design you want, and they ship it right to you. Now, if you're not a t-shirt person, but you like comics, I've got several comics and graphic novels available, namely my books High Crimes, Count, and Retroactive. High Crimes is kind of Breaking Bad meets Cliffhanger. Retroactive is like James Bond meets Groundhog Day, and Count is my sci-fi reimagining of the Count of Monte Cristo. Think kind of a, you know, John Wick meets Batman meets Zorro. It's a cool story with swashbuckling action and sword fights and vehicle chases, and it's about redemption, revenge, and revolution. So those are all available at your local comic shop, bookstore, or at the links in the description below. So to everyone who's picked up a shirt already or one of my books, thank you so much. Like, it means the absolute world to me, and I really, really appreciate it. It really helps make it so that I can do this kind of stuff and bring you more videos. Couldn't ask for anything more, so thank you. So that is going to do it for this one. Until next time, keep your head on swivel.